So welcome to session two, where we're going to revisit some of the seed starting stuff that we didn't get to last class, but we're definitely going to talk about how to start a garden from scratch. Now, you may already have a garden space, and I hope you do. That's great. But there are going to be some people who they've moved to a new place or whatever, or they want to start a new garden. Beyond what the one that's there. Here's what I hope that you get from this. Even if you started gardens before, I hope to give you tips and tricks that make it just easier for you to start a new garden space or to continue to maintain a new garden space. We're going to talk about no-till gardening, which is a way of transitioning, starting from scratch or transitioning and maintaining a garden year after year after year after year, whether they're raised beds or just an open space, or if they're in rows or landscaping, whatever type of garden it is. No-till gardening is a method where it's low labor. You don't have to get like the tiller out. You don't have to dig. And we're going to go over how I've been doing that for the past, I don't know, 5 years, I think, or so. Like not like hardcore no-till gardening, but like dedicated, that it would be the word, dedicated to not using the tiller. And it's been great. Actually probably 6, because I started my school garden. Anyway, so some other things to know. I made, and I haven't uploaded them yet, but I'm going to drop them on our YouTube channel. I made dedicated videos that are just about these plastic trays and some of the other seed starting materials. Tonight I'm uploading them. I'm going to make them live and stuff like that. So if it's one of those things that it's like, if you're interested in more stuff about seed starting that we didn't get to last class, we can only cover so much. And then it's like, if you really want to geek out a little more, you want like the next level of like the description of like, well, what are these trays? And I break it down. So there's 3 videos that are going to be uploaded that are about seed starting. Let's see if I can actually I can even tell you like the general titles, because maybe you want to go to Try Gable's YouTube channel and check them out. The seed starting trays. Ooh, row covers. Where'd my row covers go? Did they fall? I put them away. I put them over there. But the row covers, that's that fabric that we put over plants and everything. I went even a little more in depth about those. And then these like must-have materials for like these like kind of secret materials of plastic and insulation. I kind of go into geek out about them a little more. Okay. So let's see. Let's go back to the presentation as we dive in and start to look ahead. So, sorry, let's present my screen. There we go. Okay. So remember that you can make my face bigger or smaller, whatever you need to do, to get a cleaner view of things. As you're looking along, I wanted to bring up that like in the handouts, I give you other ideas of other things that you might not have ever heard about. Now, we're not going to talk about high tunnels or caterpillar tunnels, but like if you really want to geek out about like different things, polytunnels, hotbeds, old school and new school hotbeds, cold frames, row covers are right there, cloche. Some of these have links where you can go look at them, and others it's like you Google the phrase and you're going to find a bazillion new things that you never even had heard about. Today is a class about like ideas, things that you can like implement and build and have fun with as you go forward in your gardening adventures. What else we got? Okay, let's go to the presentation. Present. So, all right, session 2. Boom. All right. So to recap some of to revisit seed starting, some of the things we didn't get to last class, we had primary needs, which were like your water, a little bit of air circulation, and temperature, definitely temperature to trigger germination. Some secondary needs that they need, what they need to form their first leaves beforehand, is definitely like a good seed starting mix. Now we didn't really get into mixes and anything, but there you'll hear different phrases. You'll hear like if you look at soils, potting soils and stuff like that at your local garden center, you'll see a seed starting mix, which that in itself tends to be inert. It's fluffy and it holds and releases water very well. That is what you want to use if you're starting seedlings. That's not what you want to use if you are growing tomatoes on your back deck in a container. Okay. With that, you'd want something called like potting soil. So seed starting mix and potting soils are actually different. A potting soil should have some fertility built into it, whether that's compost, or whether that's a Miracle Grows proprietary fertilizer or whatever. So a seed starting mix is going to be something that you can buy in small quantities just to use to fill trays and start seedlings. Okay. So just to know, and then to go beyond that, there's something like if you buy bagged topsoil, that's like really heavy stuff. That's not meant for being in pots. That's meant like topsoil is literally them scraping off the soil from the ground and you'd be using that to like maybe start a raised bed or something like that. Topsoil in a raised bed, fine, because it's not a container garden like on your deck or something like that. There's lots of different things that are bagged up and sold. Point being is that have no shame of like telling somebody at the store what you're planning on doing and asking for recommendation if you're confused. But seed starting mix is what you'd want for starting seeds. You want clean containers and you want the right size containers. I think we talked a little bit about soil blocks and stuff like that, or the cell size of these plastic things and how big they might be. Basically, if something is going to be ready to go outside into colder temperatures or whatever, you can generally start it in something smaller, in smaller cells. Choosing the right side for something that is going to need more time growing, more babying. And I always think of my tomatoes, my peppers, my eggplant, those things, they're going to need bigger containers because we're going to want to be growing them longer for a month and a half before we end up putting them outside in the garden. So that they might need more space. Now, what that means is that like, it doesn't mean that you need to start off with the largest size available. Maybe you'll do something called potting up. That's on the next slides. Don't worry about it. And we did talk about watering with a mister, but I didn't necessarily say this. You water at the soil level. You avoid watering foliage. You avoid watering the leaves of your baby plants, especially if they're growing indoors, just because a buildup of moisture could be a breeding ground for fungi and mold and stuff to rot your plants. But if you're watering at the soil level, any excess water should work its way down through the soil and get dispersed out throughout all the soil and everything and get used by the plant that way. Let's see, we talked about that. We didn't get into the final set of needs, but if you're starting seedlings, there's going to be a thing that you have to prepare them for life in the garden. I think we definitely talked about cold frames and how you could use row covers, how you could use row covers outside to protect your plants. So altogether, there's let's see, yeah, you're going to need to monitor root growth. Now, what that means is that you're looking to make sure the roots are not like getting bound up, going around and around in circles or anything like that. If you start to see when you pull the plant up and you start to see lots of roots, that means that it's like ready to go in the ground. If you can pull the little plant up by gently by its stem, and the soil and the roots all come out, and it's like a frozen popsicle stick, and the whole thing stays together. That's a sign that you have enough root development to then either pot it up into a larger pot or to put it out into the garden. You're also monitoring canopy development. Now, what I mean by that is as the leaves get bigger and you have them row by row by row by row, all next to each other in your starting seeds, as the leaves start to touch one another, they can sense that they're touching other leaves and they get overlapped. And what happens when they get overlapped is that then the plant wants to grow taller, to grow beyond this other canopy level. And what you have is this competition. When you have the canopy of your plants filling up what they will do is try to outcompete each other, growing taller, longer stems that aren't as strong to try and reach the light from one another. Okay, so that your method of dealing with that is that you either get them out into the garden and plant it in the garden, okay, before they get tall and skinny and flimsy, or you pot them up. Potting up means taking a plant that's in a smaller container and moving it into a larger container. So it could be meaning that you go out and you buy little peat pots. It means that you could go out and buy little plastic pots, you know, to take something that was in a little 6-pack and then move it up, or was in a soil block and move it up into something a little bit bigger to give it more room to grow. This is all going to depend on your timing of the year. Like if you accidentally started your tomatoes in February, that's way too early, because now you're going to have it all through February and March and April, and it's still not warm enough to plant them in May. Like that'd be too soon. I don't start my tomatoes until April. No, you know, even sometimes like mid-April or the end of April, knowing that I'm going to be growing them all through May before I plant them in June. I know that if I wait until the soil is actually really warm with those warm weather plants, that I'm going to have success. So I hold off on even worrying about them. Now, some people may be starting their tomato seeds already. It's fine. You're just going to be growing them indoors for a much longer time. And you'll find as you learn that you can hold off on it and just wait until you get the warmer temperatures outside, and then just plant a bit earlier before those warm temperatures, 3 weeks, 4 weeks or so, to get them developed. All right, so anyway, potting up, monitoring space, and seeing, do you need, so here's the thing, the bad thing about potting up is that you start to lose room. You're running out of room of where am I going to put all these plants? And then you're like, I think I need to build a greenhouse. And then you build a greenhouse, and then you're like, I'll build a greenhouse. All right, but anyway, so I built a greenhouse. And then you find that you use it for storage space rather than a greenhouse. Let's see, going back, hardening off, that is just getting the plants. We did talk about that, so I'm not going to jump into that. You will go back to last week's video if you want to see hardening off stuff. So what did I do today? So today I took, this is the litter from my, we have an indoor rabbit. And every day, not every day, every week I clean out the rabbit cage. I dump it into my compost bin. Now, am I really composting it? No, what I'm doing is gathering the materials so that I can then use those materials in the garden or in the compost later on. So when we talk about composting, I think that's next week or the final week, you know, talking a bit about composting and stuff like that, making your own fertilizer. I bulk gather material for a long time before I then process it. Now, here's a secret though, is that rabbit manure is not very harsh on the plants. It's a very mild manure, meaning I can put it directly in the garden and it won't like chemically burn the plants. If I did that with chicken manure, cow manure, horse manure, those are so rich with nutrients that you're going to burn your plants, you need to season those. You need to let them like simmer down, or you need to set them aside, or you need to compost them so anyway, I spread this out over my garden, and as I got my hands in there and everything, I swear I can still smell like rabbit manure in my nose right now, even though I did this early in the morning. The one that was covered up is like super dry. And then, I just spread it with my pitchfork, just flinging it out all over the garden bed. But here's the thing, is that even though the ground was like freezing and stuff like that, and this pile was cold, it was still warm enough to have like earthworms in it, to have these composting worms in it. And that was great to see. So today, what did I also do? I started 2 like new little compost piles. I set up the fencing in my garden, actually redid the whole fencing in my garden. And so I'm like really happy. I got like a little tool storage area. This is no big deal, but these are my favorite tools, by the way, as we start talking about gardens. Pitchfork, like this is just a 5-tined pitchfork. I love it. You're going to want one of those if you don't have one. They are great for moving around bulk materials. a heavy duty, shovel, a spade. And I like the metal or fiberglass handles that really last over time. Same thing, metal or fiberglass handles on an iron rake. And I like these trapezoidal hoes. Now this one has a wooden handle that I'm actually gonna have to replace soon because it's wood. But I love these trapezoidal hoes. They're really good for just slicing into the soil and doing lots of things. And then of course, heavy duty hoses. When in doubt, buy the heaviest hose you can. It's going to last. It's not going to kink as much. You're going to be happy if you spend the extra money on a thick walled hose that's like 3/4 instead of like, I don't know, 5/8 or a ½ inch thick. You large diameter hoses. Anyway, what did I do? So today I spread all the straw on top of my garden. And this week I got my new fence line up where I'm going to have my grapes trellised along this fence line. I'm super happy because these grapes are mature and they've been fruiting on the ground and I haven't had anything for them to climb on. I've been waiting for them to grow. And now I'm going to have asparagus popping up all along this like 50-foot row. That's fully established, has been growing there for years. And now growing above the asparagus is going to be grapevines that I have established in there. Just so happy. And then there's rhubarb there too. The big thing I got set up was this no-till garden. That's what you're going to learn today, is how to prep and set up your garden space year after year after year with like low effort. This involved, let's see, this involved like actually like buying. Oh, the order is off. I am so sorry. I'm just like leaving my presentation so that I can, there we go. The order is off on my animations here. Tiny thing. Let's see if let's go back to present mode, see if that works. There we go. So what I wanted to show you was, I wanted to show you like, how this started out today, because it taps into everything that we're going to talk about in class today. So I got 2 gigantic things of straw today. This altogether cost, each one cost about $75, and each one was about 20 bales or so of straw worth, but these were gigantic bales. This is what my garden looked like after I spread. When I look at this, I can see the rabbit manure that I spread, and I backed my trailer up here, and then I shoved these off. These weigh about 500 pounds, each one of these. It's literally half a ton of straw on that trailer there. I let my daughter cut the strings on these, and then it like popped open. And we get these books of straw that I then laid down. You can actually see them. I didn't even like break them up, because what we're going to talk about today is creating like a mulch layer that's so thick that like weeds just don't grow through it. They spend all their energy trying to grow through your mulch layer that they end up failing. And so that's what I've got here, is I just laid these are like 3 foot by 3 foot, 3 foot by 3 foot, 3 foot by 3 foot ish. I think they're actually closer to 4 foot by 4 foot actually. But yeah, and so one bale did like half of my garden and the other bale did the other half. And then I even had some straw left over to compost with later. I'm just wicked happy, and I'm just sharing it with you. Honestly, why am I sharing this with you? I'm sharing this with you because as we talk about starting a garden from scratch, I am a huge proponent of the no-till gardening system, because of just because, look at this. In one day, I did all the work I needed to do to set up my garden. I spread some manure, some fertility on there, and then I put a whole bunch of straw on top of it. And now this is going to be a weed-free garden for the whole season. It's like, look at that. I spent $150 on the straw. The manure was free. And I've also got chicken manure that I can work into the mix and stuff like that. And now this just sits there. And then later on, I plant into it. I use the skills of seed starting to start transplants. And then what I do is I peel back and I pull back the straw and I dig into it. And I pop a transplant, a tomato in. I pop a zucchini transplant. I pop cucumber transplants in. I pop herb transplants in. Okay, I want to grow some carrots. Okay, so I rake back a whole bunch of straw in a block, and I right down to the bare soil. And that's the one place I'll have bare soil where I might have to weed and stuff like that because the soil's exposed. And I plant my carrots and I direct seed those. I get a tool called a dibble. Oh man, where's my dibble? Dibble, 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 dibble. There we go. Okay, favorite tools. I get a dibble and I pierce through the straw in the soil level and then pull it out and I pop my bean seeds in one at a time. Plant those. And then I've got my green beans popping up through the straw. Again, like I hope you hear my passion in this is that this has been a game changer in home gardening because I don't have to weed and it just grows and it's awesome. The key there though that you saw is the volume of straw that I was using, a thick amount of straw and not hay. Let's see. Oh, this is not the mushroom growing class. We did not talk about the difference between hay and straw. By the way, we don't got time. There's a difference between hay and straw is what you want. Okay. So let's see. Of course, if you were to like go to our website, if you were to like take my no-till gardening class, it's like an hour and a half of like the even more details than we get into in this class. And the mushroom growing class goes along with it. You might not think about it, but the mushroom class, actually, I grow mushrooms in the straw that's in my garden bed. And like that one goes into detail about how to set that up. Okay. Anyway, remember that you can use the chat. Let's see, just looking ahead. Fertilizer during the indoor periods. So that's a great question. Just to back up about the seedlings, let's just address that now in the chat. The question of, do you need fertility for indoor seedlings? Here's a general rule of thumb. If you're going to go beyond 3 or 4 weeks of indoor growth, then yes, but the fertility could be something as simple as when you made your compost mix, made your potting mix in the beginning, you mix some compost into it. Done. Okay. Generally, you don't need a lot of fertility in those early stages. You need it for the huge plant growth that you need out in your garden. So it makes more sense that when you plant the transplants in, that you're then maybe sprinkling a little fertilizer around it, like you buy like an organic fertilizer, or you do the manure or the compost thing, or you just plant it into soil that you've already worked those amendments into. That keyword, vocab word, amendments, is the stuff that we add to the soil to create fertility or to or if our soil is lacking certain elements in it. So I think, oh man, I've taught so many classes, so I don't know if I've said it, but if I haven't said it, and I know it's not really in the presentation, if you haven't done a soil test, it's worth doing a soil test to see what's in your garden, especially if you know that you have, a growing space that's near old buildings that could have had lead paint. Okay, so soil test is a simple thing to do. You literally just dig up a cup full of soil and you send it out to, look for Connecticut, you Google it, Connecticut soil testing. And it shouldn't cost much more than $30. And you get data back about your soil and what you should do to improve it for growing different things. Anyway, all right, let's get past this. What's a no-till garden? We got a little bit of this and then lots of ideas. Okay, so the benefits of no-till gardening. All right, so yeah, there's going to be natural aeration and drainage in the soil level. It definitely saves water. I rarely water my garden because of all that mulch that's on top of that, all that straw. The top layer of straw gets dry, but the rest of it stays moist. Even in the heat of the summer, I rarely need to water because it just conserves so much water because of all that. It reduces or eliminates the need to weed. Yeah, guaranteed. There's going to be some spots where like I do have to weed a little bit here and there. I maybe have grasses coming in or but it's significantly less. Definitely saves time and energy. Now, energy, like you see, in one day, I set that up all by myself. Imagine if I had other people helping me. Now, in one day, I literally mean it took me 2 hours to go up and get the straw, and then it took me 2 hours to spread the straw out and create my little compost pile and to spread out the manure all over my garden. That took me 2 hours. And I'm done. It's just, so it really saves time. And the time that I save in weeding later on, the frustration, no-till gardening helps soil retain carbon. All of that organic matter that we're adding on top of that, the straw and everything else, it gets worked into the soil, depositing carbon into the soil. It helps build earthworm populations, because there's going to be fungi that break down and eat the there's going to be, let's see, my screen sharing is paused. What's up with that? There's going to be fungi that break down and eat the straw, and the worms, the earthworms, eat the fungi. And so it's definitely going, your slides aren't showing. Do we have the same? Let's see. So here, let me see. Let's see, is that working now for the, okay. Sorry, just checking the chat. Okay, good. Thanks for the yes on there. It's definitely different than the Zoom meeting where somebody could just unmute and say yes, but at least the attention's on this. Okay, so it helps reduce soil erosion because imagine you don't have water, you don't have rain just pouring down on the soil surface, eroding it away. It's got to, the rain pours on the straw and the soil just stays in place. If anything, you are building soil. And that's what you're going to find if you do the no-till gardening method inside of a raised bed. You can start with no extra soil in that raised bed, and you will be building soil in that bed as you go through the years. That's actually what I do in my school garden. So no-till looks like this. It looks like this. You're going to have, so, I had fun making about a dozen little paintings, illustrations for this class. It's part because I like doing it, and part because I just don't want to like get in trouble for using a picture that I don't have permission using. You see that like all my pictures, they're mine, and I'm phasing out anybody else's pictures, so that even like the diagrams are ones that I drew. So you've got your native topsoil, and you may even have your native grasses, and so your lawn, you're literally your lawn. And what you're going to likely do is put some sort of weed barrier. That could be something like a weed mat. It could be a landscape fabric. It could be a cardboard that's going to break down. Now, my recommendation is you save your Amazon boxes if you're going to start a new garden from scratch. So do you need this if you already have a regular garden? No, you're going to start in with your compost and amendments spread on the top of the soil surface, and then a thick layer of mulch. You see this number right here, 4 to 6 inches. Now, 4 to 6 inches means 4 to 6 inches when it's compacted. Not, I spread the straw out and it was all nice and fluffy, 6 inches. That 6 inches is going to compact down to 3 inches. And what you'll find is that you'll get weeds that'll pop up through that. Having a thick layer of straw or wood chips or something on top is what's going to be the key element of this. A lot of biomass on top that makes it really hard for any dormant seeds that are just sitting here in the soil, ready to come and work their way up. Yeah. All right. So some of my favorite garden tools for, so setting up. So as we talk about, I have to rephrase because this is not about no-till gardening. This is about imagining how do you start a garden from scratch. Okay, so here's what I would say is that if your soil is compacted, meaning like if you try to put a shovel in it or something and it's like stiff and it's hard to work that soil, or if you have grass that your lawn that you're trying to turn into a garden, you are going to do some soil prep. Even if this means that you're just going to put a raised bed on top, you should do these methods. So now this is either of these. So you could get the rototiller out just to chop up the grasses and stuff like that, and just to create your garden space. You're also going to discover all your rocks when you rototill like that. Okay, so you could pay to have somebody just, even there are people who do this as a service. You look for them on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and stuff like that, who have rototillers, and they will come till your garden. And it's worth doing it rather than buying the equipment, especially if you know that you're never going to use that rototiller after this first year again. So you're looking for something that's going to loosen the soil. you're just going to be doing this in the growing bed area, meaning where you have walking paths, you don't need to do this thing in the walking paths. It's going to remove rocks and sod your grasses, and stuff like that, and chop it up. And this is where you're going to amend the soil. If you need to lime your soil to reduce its acidity so that it's, well, yeah, to reduce its acidity, make it a little more neutral and stuff like that. This is where you're going to add amendments in compost or other things. So here's the thing, is that I start nearly all of my gardens without a rototiller. I do it with these two tools: a spade fork, which it also goes by other names, but this is what it looks like. It is thick tines. These tines are like an inch wide. This is not a pitchfork. It's a spade fork. It's made for digging. And a garden spade. Now, this is not a shovel. This has a flat, sharp-edged blade for slicing in. And so the double digging method, which is what you're seeing here, is a method where you dig out a trench where your garden bed is, and you save that soil off to the side. And what you end up doing is, in the bottom of that trench, just shove the fork in to loosen up those lower levels. So, and then put any amendments on top. Now, what you do after that for the next trench next to it is take the dirt from the next trench and flip it upside down over here. That way, if it had grasses and stuff like that, the grass that might have been growing on the top is now right down here. Actually, I missed that in the illustration. I should have done something like that. Had green patches up here. It's watercolor. I'll edit my painting later on. But yeah, the green grasses would be down here, putting them roots up. Now, what that means is that is organic matter that's just going to rot away and die because you flip them upside down. Now, starting a garden where I realize that people are going to be starting gardens all over in different places, at the edge of their yard near trees, and you've got tree roots growing in. That's where something like that spade fork or loppers are going to be handy. You should realize that if you are working near trees and establish things that you're not getting rid of, those root systems will work their way into the garden, and they will pull away moisture, and they will shade your garden. Sun is food, light is food. Like we saw with the transplants and the seedlings last class, is that light is food. And that really goes for outdoors. Even though it may not be the best place in your yard, wherever you're growing things like veggies and flowers and herbs, you want that to be in one of the brightest lit spots of your yard, or at least a place that gets a significant number of hours of daylight in your yard, direct sunlight. So as you're planning the placement of your garden, there's going to be things like that you should think about. Okay. Do you have to use manure? Is it safe if children are helping in the garden? So generally with manure, you should be composting it. So that means that you're processing the manure and breaking it down. And that way nobody's handling manure. Manure is not like a safe thing to like dive your hands into all the time, especially if you don't know where those animals are coming from. Can you use leaf compost as a barrier instead of cardboard? Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, if you're putting soils and other things on top of that, yeah, a leaf litter and stuff like that. See, here's the one thing with like leaves and grasses, if you were to use like layers of grasses, is that matting creates anaerobic digestion, which creates a different type of rot. I would say to avoid it. One layer of cardboard is not going to create like that type of digestion. I imagine it, since it's like a foot under soil, it's generally going to be fine. It's generally going to be fine. So I'll just shut up. You can use leaf compost if you wanted to use that as your lowest barrier level. Are coffee grounds helpful for the garden? Yeah, absolutely, they are. And all right, we're going to get into composting is a whole nother class. That's great that you're asking about it. One of these sessions is talking about composting. So as I look at my watch, I got some more slides to get through, some more things. Keep your questions, keep banking them, because the end of class we'll come back and answer them. All right, so here's the thing, is that do you have to be strict no-till gardening? No, but like these are methods that you can use within your gardening system to reduce things, reduce what the idea of just putting, if maybe you don't have, manure or compost or whatever, and maybe you're not going to do true no-till gardening, but just the idea of putting mulch on every year, that's really going to be beneficial in so many ways. But when it's done in conjunction with adding fertility every year and not tilling the soil over, you're going to have lots of benefits from that, not bringing up weed seeds that have been laying dormant for a decade down in the lower levels of the soil, which they actually are. All right, so let's see. General methods for no-till gardening. There's going to be some setup. All right, so you may have to smother, you may have to till once. So if you're tilling, you don't have to smother, because you're breaking up what's there, you're chopping it up, and then you're going to smother it with all that straw or whatever on top. So you can take a patch of grass and smother it with your cardboard and stuff like that. That, like, when you put a little kiddie pool out on the grass, it kills the grass. That's basically what you're doing. But on top of that, like, kiddie pool thing that's killing the grass, you're also putting like straw or some other organic material like that on top of the system that's going to allow a lot of aeration and allow you to plant directly into it once it's smothered. Now, the smothering process is one where you're going to have to wait. I want you to kind of keep this number in the back of your head: 6 weeks. Could you plant within a month's worth of time? 4 weeks? Probably. But if you're putting cardboard down on top of grass, that grass has to rot. It has to not only die, it then has to rot, which takes a few more weeks' time. Within 3 weeks, the grass is dead, but then it's going to take a little more time to rot and get kind of composted. And that cardboard that you're putting down will also greatly soften up. Imagine if you didn't have the straw on top of the cardboard. The cardboard would just be like dry on top. It wouldn't be like soft and pliable. But with the straw on top, that cardboard kills the grass, and then you can literally just dig right into the cardboard because it's so soft and it just tears, and you can plant into it. So, or you're starting a garden, you're transitioning an existing raised bed or garden into a no-till gardening thing. And that's what I've done before. You're probably, once you set it up, you're probably going to have to wait a month or 6 weeks. So if we're looking at, it's the beginning of April now, that means I'm just waiting. I'm waiting until true mid-May, not the first week of May, mid-May, May 15th or so, before I plant in there. Because I'm giving time for anything that once was alive to die and rot away. Layers you saw that in my illustration. Every year we're adding layers on top, and we're not tilling or disturbing those layers. We're letting the earthworms bring those nutrients up and down through the soil structure. And so let's see. And then after you're planting, you're waiting around and you're harvesting later on. And then later on, like you saw how I revived my no-till garden this year by spreading the manure on and putting that. You could also do that in the fall. That's actually something that I would highly recommend, is that if you know you're not growing anything in the fall, if you know that you're only a summer gardener, then it absolutely makes sense to you could spread fresh manure out in the garden and then cover it with your straw, your mulch, let it sit there all winter long. What's going to happen is that manure that you spread out will season and will mellow out over the whole winter long underneath the straw and start to decompose underneath the straw and be ready to plant in the spring. So let's go back. Again, feel free to keep banking questions in the chat. I may end up answering them as we go, or we'll get to it in that last chunk of time, which we're almost there. But I did want to just give you ideas of types of gardens. This will probably go another 5 minutes or so. You got 2 legs. Oh, it says that my screen is not sharing. Let's try it again. Let's see. I'm going to try that again. At least I got a warning that it wasn't sharing. There we go. Okay. So what type of garden should you choose? So this is just like ideas for you if you haven't thought about it. Of course, you could do like the landscaping route. You can plant veggies and herbs within a formal landscaping, area that you have. You could create a dedicated little patch, or you could actually plant veggies and herbs among the flowers and other things that you have in your garden. Yay, look at these silly little watercolors I made. All right, but anyway, um, you could till or work a much larger area and just have open beds and rows and row crops. Sometimes on the back of seed packets, they tell you how long a row of something that you could grow or something. So this would be planting in blocks like this, corn all in a block, or lettuces or something like that all in a block, or like onions and cabbages and kales and protected crops all in rows. This can be an efficient way of using a system. However, there's aisles in between each one of these, and that is wasted space that you could be growing something in this footpath if you were willing to reach over one crop into the next. So sometimes this is the best thing just to get going if you've got a lot of space. But is to have blocks of crops and rows of crops. However, it does waste space. So I want you to hear pros and cons. Raised rows. Now, here's the thing. This is different than raised beds. Now, so a raised row is where you have your soil and you have a smother layer like cardboard or something like that you put directly on the soil, and then your straw. And then what you're doing is on top of the straw, you're putting a little handful, not a handful, but like a clump like this much of actual topsoil on top of that, and then planting your seedlings and your transplants directly into it. This is actually a pretty neat way of growing, because as this settles in and as your transplant grows down, it's going to grow down through the straw and then tap into your soil anyway. So this is something called raised row gardening, which I have like this book behind, whatever. I'll hold up the books later. Raised rows are they're different than raised beds. So we're also going to talk about raised beds, and you can have unframed raised beds, meaning you literally just dig out the paths and you toss it on top of the soil that's there. And then you do your no-till gardening on top of it. You put your mulches and you grow. Now, the benefits of a raised bed is that there are low spots and high spots. And so if you have like really like wet soil, having parts of your soil raised up above will allow them to drain out so that your seedlings and stuff don't rot. It may mean that you have to water a little bit more, but as long as you have mulch on top, it's going to mitigate that. Okay. And then a formal raised bed is where you've got them framed. So here's the thing, is that you're typically sinking those raised beds in into the ground level. And you could have them as low raised beds or higher raised beds. And that's what I've tried to draw here, is that you're with a high raised bed, you're likely going to be building the soil level up, actually adding soil. But if you're just doing a 6 or 12-inch raised bed, you can do that with your native soil. And I want you to see, year after year, you're going to be adding layers. Do you need to fill that thing up with soil that your first year? No, you actually need to leave lots of room at the top of this box so that you can put straw in it, so that you can put compost in it, because every year you're going to be adding stuff to these boxes. You don't have to have it any higher than how deep your soil is. So you would do that double digging method just where this is, then drop your box on top of it. And now the soil is going to be fluffy, and then you're going to do your layers year after year after year. That is how I would recommend doing setting up raised beds. So as we talk about raised beds, here's more ideas for you as you're building them. Here's a little diagram of like, using 4x4s in the corner and what materials to use, decking, drilling pilot holes. Plan out where you're really going to put these. Where are you going to put your compost bins? Where are you going to put gates? Where are you going to put fences? Your fence, if you're going to use a fence, the purpose is going to drive the materials you choose. If you need to keep animals in or out, you're not going to do a split rail fence. If you need, if the looks is what you care about, then you're probably not going to put up like a wire mesh fence because, you may not like the look of it. Do you need to trellis things? Does it need to be sturdy to hold, like my garden, grapevines or something like that, and double as a fence and a trellis at the same time? Think about, what are you going to do with the edge of your garden And that should help you choose the material that you use around the edge of your garden. Also plan out paths for your wheelbarrows. Are you going to want to get a tractor or a garden cart in there? And are there going to, think about who's going to be accessing it, adults and kids and stuff like that. Make it so it's friendly. Having gigantic raised beds like this, where you have to have walking stones or wooden planks inside so you can step on those. These are actually pretty like cumbersome. They may be perfect for you, but it's really hard to access those spaces on the inside. Having smaller beds like this, like 4 foot by 4 foot wide is going to be nicer. Maybe you want to ornamentally like space them out and have smaller ones. Maybe you want to have containers in your garden as well, in your raised beds as well. Maybe you want to have add-ons later on. Maybe you want to build it so that you can put hoops on it and create a mini greenhouse. All of these are just ideas of what you could do, not just with like raised beds, but like a no-till garden raised bed. Just it's amazing stuff. Now, of course, there's going to be cost up front with a raised bed like this because you've got to build it. And lumber prices right now are actually crazy. There's a book, Raised Bed Revolution, which is an awesome book if you're just looking for other ideas and designs on how to build them from scratch. Other things that you may consider, especially if you're going to want to incorporate fruits in there, is a forest garden. Now, a forest garden is where you think about the largest things that you're going to be planting, your trees, and then your dwarf trees and stuff like that. And on a 3-dimensional level, you're capturing sunlight, not just in one level, but using the vertical space as well. I'd encourage you to totally like dive into like forest gardening. And this can be a way to grow a lot of stuff in a small space, or a lot of stuff in any space. What's been shown in a forest garden where you have multiple levels of things, like I have my fruit trees with my grapes, and I have raspberries and rhubarb, and I've got asparagus and all sorts of things growing underneath the canopy of the trees. And while these trees are maturing, I am using all of the space in the rows between my trees. This is an awesome book if you're interested in forest gardening, and if you're interested in orchards, that's an awesome book. I also teach like a whole backyard orchard book class that we do. Hugelkultur is something that you've probably never heard of. I know we're over on the 45-minute thing, but whatever. You've got legs, you can walk. If you want your questions answered, hang in. So Hugelkultur it's this German word for these garden beds that have like logs built into them. You have your normal like soil level, and what you're doing is you're like digging out the soil and then mounding it on top of organic matter that's woody organic matter, a woody biomass that breaks down over time. Now, what you have now is a 3-dimensional surface to plant on. Instead of just planting things in a row here, you are planting them on a curve, and you can plant some things here and some things up top. And so I encourage you, if this is something that you're like, that's interesting. I don't have the rights to the photos. Google it. Google Hugelkultur and look at the photos of these garden beds, and it may very well be the way that you'd want to do a no-till garden. By the way, all of these are no-till garden ideas where you don't have to till. This is a horrible illustration. I'm sorry, it didn't come out, but just imagine terraces. I actually have a terraced garden that's like this, that has logs built into the layers of the terrace to hold the soil structure in it as it's going down the slope. So if you have a sloped yard, you can flatten it out and create flat growing spaces by kind of merging together the Hugelkultur practice of using wood in there, but the wood to kind of support your terraces. Instead of getting stones or bricks or retaining walls, you're using wood to create your retaining walls. It's an idea that I've done in practice. Okay, so last bit here is just me doing show and tell of how I transitioned my no-till garden into a tilled garden, or my tilled garden to a no-till garden. It was a garden that was a tilled garden. I tilled it every single year. I got the rototiller out. I borrowed one from a cousin of mine, and it was a pain in the butt to rototill this huge space. And so what I did that first year was I got a load of compost, chicken manure compost. So it was composted chicken manure. And I got these 2 big bales of straw. And I spread the straw out, and I got my seedlings going in my greenhouse, and then those seedlings started taking off. There you go, in my little soil blocks. And then later on, this is what my garden looked like in the summer. Now, this is partway through the growing season. I got beans, I got squash and cucumbers and stuff growing in here, and tomatoes, and there's just herbs. There's like basil galore growing in here, and this is right next to my chickens. And whatever. This is my garden. My garden is a jungle, and that's the way I like it. But you see what I'm doing is I'm planting directly into the straw. And I want you to see that when I say that there's like no weeds, like look at this. You're seeing plants that I chose to grow and my sunflowers and stuff like here, and it's growing densely, and there aren't weeds. The only place where I see weeds in this picture is right here, and that's because that's my mint that got out of control. All right, you put mint in pots and you leave it in pots. You don't put it in your garden like I did. But anyway, and then the jungle got even more big, bigger and bigger. And then, all right, so we got pictures of my jungle. This is also my no-till garden for underneath my orchard trees, how I set them up. I put down this landscape fabric and then a huge amount of wood chips, and then I plant right into them with other perennial things like my raspberries, my rhubarb, my asparagus, and it grows right up through this fabric year after year, and all I got to do is replenish those wood chips. Planting mushrooms in here breaks down the straw, and you grow mushrooms at the base of your plants. There's a wine cap mushrooms growing, and so you get something else. This is something that if you want, I got my on-demand like mushroom growing class, or maybe you're registered for the other mushroom growing class where I already taught this. But it's actually pretty easy to spread this and to like infect the straw with mushrooms and eat those mushrooms. And here's a picture of my no-till school garden. Same thing, picture after picture, linking those together. You see, so these are raised beds that are about 12 inches high. A couple inches of that is set into the soil level, and we did not add any soil to these raised beds. I want you to see that the beds are getting kind of full with stuff, but that's because the biomass increases in those beds year after year. All right, and then I've already gone over how I revived my garden, but this is worth seeing. In a no-till garden, using the mushrooms to eat the straw, by the end of the year, look at how much straw is left. Hardly any of the straw is left, because the worms have eaten the fungi that have eaten the straw, and they've worked it all into the soil. So the following year, I spread compost onto it. Oh, these are just like other tools that I just love. I spread compost onto it, and then I start getting bales of straw and spreading it out just onto the growing areas where I have my paths. I'm not putting compost, and I'm not worrying so much about the straw. And this is just to illustrate the thickness. You want 6 inches of straw. Okay, and so this was a couple years ago, me refreshing it, and so you can see I didn't have my fence up. My grapevines were crawling along the ground. They needed some structure. I finally got them structure this year. I think this was last year's, what last year's looked like. No, because this was last year's where I got the wood chips involved. Like I've been saying, this is multiple years of me documenting what does my no-till garden look like year after year as I'm prepping it each spring. Oh yeah. So next class, we're gonna talk about composting. We're gonna talk about soil blocks, and making your own fertilizers, and talking about seed starting mixes, how you can make your own. Awesome. So let's go back to the chat and stuff. What do you guys got for any questions? Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Does the straw break down completely so it gets pretty darn close. You saw in those pictures, it gets pretty darn close to breaking down every year, especially when I'm adding fungi in there to grow mushrooms in the straw. But then it feeds the worms, and the worms poop their fertility right there where my plants are growing. Again, not to keep plugging my classes, but like the mushroom growing class that I teach, that's like available on demand. It's a mind-blowing class of how you can grow mushrooms at home. And the no-till gardening class goes even further than what we talked about here in class. You'll see that there's some repeats, but there's even more. What else we got? All right, so feel free. So attendees, let's see. I can see the list of attendees. If you do the raised hand thing, I can unmute you. You can talk, or you can just type it in the chat or in the Q&A right now if you got questions. All right. I mean, we could call it quits. I could say goodbye, or we could hang around. Dun, dun, dun. Nice to see so many people here. Let's see. I don't see any hands, but feel free to use the chat. Like I said. We have silence. Oh, there we go. I see something. Yeah. Good combination with the mushroom cloud. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Seaweeds for fertilizer. So, do I have any? I'll try to bring that out next class. So I don't have any experience in going gathering seaweeds because I live in Colchester. I don't live by the shore. There are folks who who have access to walking the beaches and harvesting seaweed. I have used seaweeds seaweed fertilizers that I buy off the shelf, and it's one of my favorite fertilizers to use. It's like, it has a lot of micronutrients built in, like tiny amounts of like copper, manganese, magnesium, iron, tiny amounts of those that when you're fertilizing. Well, how about we'll definitely talk about seaweed. I'm going to make a note of that, of the seaweed and fish fertilizers. Next class. It's definitely going to tie in. I don't mean to brush off your question. Fertilizer. So I use them. I like using seaweed fertilizers as a liquid spray on seedlings, more so than almost anything else, if I know the seedlings are going to be hanging around before they go in the garden. Also during the main growing season, every couple weeks, I say couple weeks, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, somewhere around there, I'll make up a batch of either compost tea that's got the seaweed fertilizer in it or fish fertilizer in it, and spray it on the leaves only of the plants. Now, when you do just the leaves, what happens is that the majority of it actually gets absorbed and used by the plant, within a short amount of time, rather than just putting it all over the place where it won't all go to the plant. The leaves are like this powerhouse of absorbing in sunlight and using nutrients and stuff like that, and then transporting it to the roots and to growth within the plant. Spraying on the foliage of the plants is a method that like greenhouse growers use. It's like a trick of the trade, is to do a foliar fertilization. I'm gonna talk about nettle tea and comfrey. Maybe comfrey. I've used comfrey because I do have comfrey that I grow. I use it in my like all-purpose compost tea that I make. But I don't have like nettles growing around here. There's one plant of nettle growing up by like my neighbor's sheep, and I got stung by it, the little hypodermic, like little thorns that it has on it. And I have a love-hate relationship with it, because like I know it's good to use as like fertilizer, but then I get stung by it. I'm like, So I got rid of the nettle that was there because my kids like to go there to watch the sheep, and I didn't want them to get stung. But anyway, we'll talk about that next class. Sure. A bit about how you can kind of go like process those. Although there's a lot to talk about next class. When I do in the summer, I'm going to be recording and doing a live organic fertility class that's going to be like the hour and a half, recorded version, but there'll be a live version that I do as well. That one would be the class where I would get into the deep details of worm bins, deeper details than we have time to do in this class for composting and for the compost teas. What you're going to get in this class is like the down and dirty quick methods, but not all of like not all of the details that I'd be doing later on this summer. But if you're interested, whatever. If you're interested, they're for sale on my class right now. Like, you could buy a seat to the summer classes already, but you don't have to. Take these free ones. This guy pushes his class a lot. Well, I mean, you know. Well, I don't know what to say. Any other things? Any other things? Any other questions or? Oh, I have the books behind me. I wanted you to remember to buy that book, this one, The Vegetable Gardeners Week by Week. Vegetable, that one's still amazing. If I didn't drive it home last week enough. If you're, so restoration agriculture is one. Here's my note. It's a deep dive into polycultures, planting multiple things, the philosophy behind it to restore a location or to rehabilitate an area. That's, if you're looking for a deep dive, good read. That's a good read into agriculture. If you're interested in that raised row gardening where you have the straw and you put like the little mound of soil on top of the straw and plant into that soil, that idea I got from this book, the Raised Row Garden book. I think it's a husband and wife team that wrote it, and that was decent. The year-round vegetable grower, you should follow the author Nikki Jabor. Nikki Jabor. You should follow her on Instagram. She's got like beautiful garden pictures all the time. You'll be like, oh. And her book is awesome if you're looking for like ideas of like layouts, if you're looking ideas for like different garden beds that you could design and build. If you're really into like, you definitely want to do raised beds, but you also want to grow veggies and like all year round, this is a book you should get. It's awesome. Get it from your local library. If you're looking for ideas, this book was put out a while ago. I feel like it's like almost 20 years now. It still holds. And it's Self-Sufficiency for the 21st Century. This is a father-son book written in the UK. So there's some things that are kind of only true to them. The pictures are just awesome. It's an inspirational book of like all of these self-sufficiency things that you can do and build and stuff all around your yard, plants that you can grow, things that you just didn't think about. It's this book, I got it at my local library and I was like, oh my God, I want to own this book. And I went on Amazon and I bought the book just because there's so many ideas in this. Every page has like a dozen ideas on it of things that you can do around your house. You're going to just like go nuts with that book. And yeah, the Holistic Orchard, we talked about that. Thanks. And great gardening books at the library too. Oh yeah, of course you do. Make sure you buy all the recommendations for patrons too. Yeah, I mean, yeah. This one's awesome. The Square Foot Gardening book. The Year-Round Vegetable Grower. I mean, geez. This one's meant to be used. This one's meant to be written in. If anything, this might be nice for a library to have, just so people could flip through it and go, oh, I want to own this book. Yeah, fun times. All right. Thanks, everybody. You have a good weekend. Happy Easter if you celebrate Easter. Happy Good Friday. The reason for Easter today, if you celebrate that. I believe if you're Greek, you wait until May. If you're Greek Orthodox. Everybody have a great time. I can say goodbye, bye. I should write and illustrate. Yeah. Oh, thanks. It's nice of you to say that I should write and illustrate a book. Definitely, as I'm like doing all of these, I'm like, I should write a book. I don't have time for that, but I should. Yeah, I'd probably have fun. I think I'd like to do like kids books, like a kids gardening book kind of thing. I think I'd have a lot of fun doing something like that because I'm a teacher too. Yeah, and I like that idea because I also like, I don't know. I also like the idea of like maybe even doing like children's stories and stuff like that. Although I probably need to like work with an author who has better ideas than I do about storylines and stuff. reminds me of Elf, the movie Elf, where they bring in whatever that guy's name was, who's like writes children's stories. What's more vulnerable than a peach or a tomato? I don't know. All right, bye, folks. Bye, bye, bye. There's 10 of you hanging in here. I bet you 10. You fell asleep. No. All right, I'm gonna call it quits. Bye. Bye bye. Say bye 10, 20 times. Take care.